Let's look at the absolute reality of how attraction works, because almost everything you've been told by modern society is a complete lie. From the time you were young, movies, music, and television shows have conditioned you to believe that winning a woman's heart requires a grand, desperate chase. You've been told that you need to buy expensive gifts, look like a photoshopped model on the cover of a magazine, or memorize cheesy, rehearsed pickup lines just to get a foot in the door. You were taught to put women on a pedestal, to cater to their every whim, and to treat dating like an audition where you are constantly begging for a passing grade. But if you look around at the men who actually follow this advice, you will notice a common theme. They are completely failing. They are getting ghosted, stuck in the friend zone, and left wondering why their absolute best efforts are met with total indifference. The brutal truth that nobody wants to admit to you is remarkably simple. Genuine attraction is never about chasing. It is entirely about self mastery. When you understand this fundamental shift, the entire game changes. You have to realize that attraction is a subconscious emotional response, not a logical choice that a woman makes based on your bank account or the brand of clothes you wear. It is an evolutionary trigger that responds to strength, stability, and emotional resilience. Society wants you to focus on the external things because it's easy to sell you products based on insecurity. But real, raw attraction is generated entirely from within. It is about how you carry yourself, how you handle pressure, and whether you are the master of your own mind. If you are constantly looking outside of yourself for validation, trying to find a trick or a shortcut to make someone like you have already lost before you even open your mouth. Most men completely destroy their chances right out of the gate because they try to win a woman's attention by entirely losing themselves in the process. The very second you meet someone you find attractive, a switch flips in your brain and you go into overdrive trying to please her. You start showering her with superficial, unearned compliments. You double text her when she takes more than 5 minutes to reply. And you fundamentally change your opinions, your hobbies, and your personality just to match hers. You think you are showing interest and being a nice guy, but in reality, you are broadcasting a massive signal of internal weakness. You are shouting to the world that you do not value who you actually are, so you have to put on a desperate performance just to keep her around. This behavior strips away your mystery, your challenge, and your masculinity, leaving you looking entirely hollow. You have to understand that women possess an incredibly sharp, almost instinctual radar for desperation and insincerity. The moment you begin to overcompensate, she instantly senses the hidden agenda underneath your behavior. She realizes that your compliments aren't genuine appreciation, they are a transaction meant to buy her approval. She sees that your constant texting isn't sweet. It's a sign that you have nothing else going on in your life and that your emotional stability hinges entirely on her response. When you put on an act to impress her, she doesn't see a confident suitor. She sees a man who is terrified of being rejected for who he truly is. Desperation is an absolute attraction killer because it signals that you are low value and incapable of standing firmly on your own 2 feet. And nothing will make a woman distance herself faster than a man who feels like an emotional burden. The reality is that women do not want to be chased, pursued, or hunted down like a prize. Chasing implies that she is running away from you, and it naturally creates an exhausting dynamic of imbalance where you are always running after her, begging for a scrap of her time. Instead of a hunter, women want to be naturally drawn to a man who is completely grounded, like a rock in the middle of a chaotic storm. They are looking for an anchor, a man whose emotional state is entirely unshakable, who does not fold under pressure, and who brings a sense of absolute certainty into the room. When you are grounded, you don't need to put on a show or scream for attention because your quiet, calm presence speaks volumes. You aren't thrown off by a late text. You aren't intimidated by a difficult conversation. And you don't lose your cool when things don't go your way. That level of self contained stability is incredibly rare, and it is the most magnetic force on the planet. If you cannot master your own mind and get a tight grip on your emotions, She will walk away every single time without hesitation. A woman wants a partner, not a project or a child that she has to emotionally manage. If she detects that your moods are wildly reactive, that you get anxious at the slightest hint of distance, or that your confidence completely shatters the moment she tests your boundaries, she will instantly lose all respect for you. And where there is no respect, attraction cannot exist. Self mastery means that your worth is non negotiable and entirely defined by you, not by her validation or attention. When you finally stop focusing on what she wants, stop stressing over her next move, and start dedicating your energy to mastering your own mind, your time, and your purpose, an incredible shift happens. You stop being the man who desperately begs to be noticed, and you naturally become the high value man that women are terrified of losing. To completely revolutionize your dating life and build a presence that commands immediate respect, you need to adopt a psychological framework that has stood the test of time for thousands of years: Stoicism. Now, let's clear up the massive misconception right away, because most people get this completely wrong. Adopting a Stoic framework does not mean you suppress your emotions, bottle up your feelings, or act like an unfeeling, cold, emotionless robot. It doesn't mean you become boring, distant, or detached from reality. True Stoicism is the exact opposite. It is about building an internal armor that makes you completely emotionally unshakable. It is the practice of recognizing what you can control, your own thoughts, reactions, and behaviors, and completely letting go of what you cannot control, which includes other people's opinions, moods, and responses. When you apply this ancient wisdom to the modern dating world, you gain an immediate, almost unfair advantage over every other guy competing for a woman's attention. While the vast majority of men are constantly operating from a place of deep rooted anxiety, a stoic man operates from absolute peace. Look at how most guys behave when they are around an attractive woman. They nervously fumble their words, overthink every single sentence, panic the exact second she takes a few hours to reply to a text, or desperately try to perform like a circus clown just to be the entertainer. They are completely dependent on her reactions. If she smiles, they feel like kings. But if she looks bored, their entire confidence shatters into pieces. A stoic man completely detaches himself from this exhausting need for external validation. He enters any interaction completely calm, entirely centered, and perfectly content with who he is, regardless of how she responds. He doesn't need her approval to feel valuable, because his value is already locked in from the inside. When you master your inner state and stop reacting to her fluctuating moods, her sharp words, or her subconscious behavioral tests, something incredible happens. You instantly stand out from the crowd. You have to realize that high value women are constantly testing men to see if they are genuine or just putting on a tough act. They will intentionally drop subtle challenges, express doubt, or pull away briefly just to see how you handle it. When you react with anger, defensiveness, or desperate anxiety, you prove that you are fragile and easily manipulated. But when you remain totally unbothered, smiling through the tension and staying perfectly grounded, you pass the test effortlessly. You become that incredibly rare, magnetic man who knows exactly who he is, creating a powerful, rock solid environment where she feels safe, deeply intrigued, and irresistibly drawn to your strength. This exact same level of grounded self mastery must carry over into the way you speak, because most men have a completely warped understanding of high impact communication. Most guys read dating blogs and falsely believe they need to memorize clever pickup lines, scripted routines, or witty, sarcastic comebacks just to keep a woman's attention. They are totally wrong, and this superficial approach always backfires. You need to understand that attractive women are completely immune to shallow praise and rehearsed banter because they hear it from dozens of men every single week. When you walk up to a woman and feed her the exact same generic compliments she's heard 1,000 times before, her brain completely tunes you out. To make a genuine, lasting impact, Your words must be highly deliberate, direct, and firmly grounded in reality. You don't need to speak the most. You just need to ensure that when you do speak, your words carry weight. The very first step to upgrading your communication is learning how to use her name strategically throughout your interactions. This sounds incredibly basic, but it is one of the most underutilized psychological tools in existence. When you drop her name naturally into key, focused moments of a conversation, rather than just at the very beginning or end, it triggers an immediate, subconscious emotional connection deep within her mind. It cuts through the background noise of everyday chatter and forces her to lock in, making her feel instantly recognized, uniquely chosen, and deeply important to you. The key here is absolute restraint. You must never overdo it, because throwing her name into every single sentence feels incredibly forced, robotic, and highly manipulative. Instead, wait for a quiet, meaningful moment. Look her directly in the eyes and use her name right as you make a poignant point or deliver a genuine observation. It will instantly make her feel like she is the absolute center of your universe in that moment. Next, you must completely eliminate superficial praise from your vocabulary and start complimenting her character, her mindset, and her intelligence instead of just her physical looks. Every low value guy focuses entirely on her face, her body, or her clothes because it's the easiest, most obvious thing to notice. If you want to separate yourself from 99% of the male population, you need to look past the surface and acknowledge who she is as an actual human being. Pay close attention when she speaks. Notice the passion in her voice when she talks about her career, her hobbies, or her personal philosophies. When she finishes sharing a meaningful story, don't just nod your head and move on to a story about yourself. Instead, speak directly to her core by saying something grounded and powerful, like, I love how passionate you are about this. It's incredibly rare to meet someone who thinks this deeply about their life. A compliment like that lands with massive impact because it proves you are actually listening, making her feel truly seen and appreciated for her mind, not just her appearance. Finally, if you want your words to hold real authority, you must stop over apologizing immediately. This is an incredibly common destructive habit where men constantly say sorry for things they didn't even do wrong, simply because they are terrified of conflict, desperate to keep the peace, or afraid of making her upset. They apologize for the weather, they apologize for the restaurant being loud, and they apologize for having a different opinion. You need to realize that constantly over apologizing completely destroys your perceived strength and projects a massive aura of submissive weakness. It tells her that you are walking on eggshells and begging for her permission to exist. A stoic man owns his actions completely. He has the maturity to apologize sincerely if he genuinely crosses a line or makes a real mistake, but he never, under any circumstances, apologizes for simply being who he is, expressing his truth, or standing by his values. When you stop apologizing for your presence, your words gain immediate gravity, and she will naturally respect you as a man of absolute conviction. You need to understand a fundamental law of human interaction. Your words mean absolutely nothing if your body language and your physical actions are constantly broadcasting a quiet story of deep insecurity. You can memorize the most perfect philosophical scripts in the world and say all the right things at exactly the right moments. But if your physical presence is leaking anxious energy, a woman will instinctively notice the contradiction and pull away. Human beings evolved to read nonverbal signals long before we ever developed spoken language, and women possess an incredibly sharp radar for matching a man's words to his physical reality. Stoicism teaches us that true internal mastery must manifest externally as a physical presence that exudes calm, unwavering certainty. Your body must act as a visual proof of your inner strength. If your internal world is a chaotic, nervous mess, your body will betray you through dozens of tiny subconscious tells. To truly command respect and spark authentic attraction, you must learn to bring your physical form into absolute alignment with a state of grounded, unshakable confidence. The absolute baseline of this physical transformation begins when you learn to fully master your body language and eliminate the nervous habits that are sabotaging your presence. Look at how the average insecure man behaves when he feels social pressure or finds himself sitting across from an incredibly attractive woman. He constantly fidgets with his hands, shifts his weight nervously from one foot to the other, taps his fingers, touches his neck, or plays with his phone just to give his anxious energy an outlet. Even worse, he constantly darts his eyes around the room, completely incapable of holding solid eye contact because looking directly at her feels too intense for his fragile confidence. All of these tiny, frantic movements send a massive, glaring signal to her subconscious mind that you are deeply uncomfortable in your own skin, terrified of her judgment, and desperate to escape the tension of the moment. If you are not comfortable with yourself, it is impossible for her to ever feel comfortable around you. To break this destructive pattern, you must consciously choose to calm your physical form and embrace stillness. When you stand, stand completely tall with your posture aligned. Consciously drop your shoulders to release the built up tension and plant your feet firmly on the ground like an anchor that cannot be moved. When you sit, occupy your space fully and lean back with relaxed comfort rather than hunching forward in a submissive posture that begs for approval. Mastery of eye contact is your most potent tool in this process. You must stop looking away the second her eyes meet yours. Instead, practice the Stoic method of striking a perfect, grounded balance. Hold her gaze deliberately for a few seconds at a time. This should be long enough to communicate that you are completely present, entirely focused, and strong enough to handle the intensity of her look, but relaxed enough to keep the interaction feeling entirely smooth and natural, rather than aggressive or forced. Stillness is power, and when you can sit comfortably in silence without needing to fidget, you project a rare aura of total self control. This exact same level of conscious control must dictate the way you navigate through the physical world, which means you must train yourself to always move with absolute purpose. Think about the way most men enter a room, a crowded restaurant, or a social gathering when they feel exposed or insecure. They rush through the door at an unnaturally fast pace, keep their heads down, and nervously scan the entire environment as if they are looking for a threat or trying to find a safe corner to hide in. This rapid, chaotic movement signals to everyone around you, especially women, that you are profoundly unsure of yourself, intimidated by your surroundings, and feeling like an imposter who doesn't belong in that space. A stoic man operates on a completely different frequency. He moves slowly, deliberately, and with an undeniable sense of internal intention. Every single step he takes is completely grounded and unhurried, communicating a deep, silent message that he is the absolute master of his immediate space and that he belongs exactly where he is standing. When you slow down your physical movements, you immediately change the entire energetic dynamic of the room. You stop reacting to the frantic pace of the world around you and instead force the environment to adapt to your calm rhythm. You don't rush to answer a question. You don't frantically turn your head the moment a door opens. And you don't walk as if you are apologizing for taking up space. Women are incredibly perceptive to this subtle shift in pacing. They instantly notice the man who carries himself with a relaxed, slow majesty because it communicates an unshakable sense of true masculinity and self assurance. It tells her that you are a man who cannot be easily rattled, panicked, or thrown off balance by external circumstances. And that level of grounded stability is profoundly magnetic in a world where everyone else is rushing around in a state of constant anxiety. Finally, you must completely discard the childish idea that winning a woman's genuine affection requires you to perform grand, over the top romantic gestures. Modern media has tricked men into believing that they need to buy massive bouquets of expensive flowers, present luxury chocolates, or orchestrate highly dramatic, superficial surprises just to prove their worth. In reality, these heavy handed tactics often feel incredibly transactional, overwhelming, and manipulative, signaling that you are trying to buy her interest because you don't believe your actual personality is enough to keep her around. If you want to build deep, authentic attraction that lasts, you must always choose genuine thoughtfulness over cheap, materialistic displays. Attraction is built in the quiet, subtle details that show you are paying deep attention to who she actually is as a person. True thoughtfulness means you are fully present and actively listening whenever she speaks, storing away the tiny details of her life that every other man completely ignores. If she casually mentions the title of her absolute favorite childhood author during a deep conversation, or briefly talks about a specific stressful challenge she is currently facing at her job, you don't just nod your head and forget about it. You lock that information away, and days or weeks later, you follow up on it with a simple, direct text message or a small, meaningful reference. It proves to her on a profound level that you aren't just waiting for your turn to speak or trying to play the role of a loud entertainer or a funny clown to keep her amused. It shows her that you are a highly perceptive, grounded man who genuinely sees her, values her mind, and respects her world. That quiet, precise level of attentiveness is infinitely more attractive, convincing, and powerful than any expensive, empty gesture could ever hope to be. The ultimate test of your character, your masculinity, and your self mastery never happens when things are going perfectly. It is incredibly easy to look confident, relaxed, and completely in control when the conversation is flowing effortlessly, the food is amazing, and she is smiling at you across the table. Anyone can play the part of a grounded man when the environment is perfectly curated. The real defining test of who you actually are as a man happens the exact moment things begin to fall apart and deviate completely from your plan. This is the precise fork in the road where boyish insecurity is exposed and true stoic strength is revealed. Women possess an incredibly sharp, almost evolutionary instinct that watches how a man handles friction, unexpected chaos, and emotional distance. They want to see if your confidence is a fragile mask that shatters at the first sign of trouble, or if it is a solid, unshakable foundation built deep within your soul. When you learn to master your reaction to negative external events, you unlock a level of attraction that modern men simply do not understand. Let's look directly at the first major arena where most men completely fail this test: when a date goes sideways. Imagine the scenario. You've planned a perfect evening, but the restaurant completely messes up your order. The service is painfully slow, the venue is way too loud, or a sudden topic introduces a heavy wave of awkward silence into the conversation. In this exact moment, the average low value man goes into an absolute panic. He feels an intense, frantic pressure to fix everything immediately, smooth over every wrinkle, and desperately make the night flawless. He might get visibly angry at the waiter, start over explaining himself, or nervously babble just to fill the quiet spaces in the room.